And to all our participants, I see you guys on there, quite a few of you who haven't asked any questions yet. Please feel free to enter your questions in now. I have an offline question for you, Michael, from Lewis, who asks, is it difficult? He says it's difficult to find models to pose for him. So any advice on what to do in the situation? Do you draw from life or just continue looking at photographs?
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing for most all of us, is that models are sometimes hard to find, and they're obviously expensive, so it's difficult. But there's a lot of good resources, like the characterdesigns.com has a huge image library of models. I always direct my students to that site for homework to do studies from photographs. I think that posemaniacs.com is a good website, especially for seeing anatomy, as all the figures are a number of different positions. They all exist as 3D, so you can spin them, and they're without skin, so you can see the different anatomical parts. That's a great website. Another one I direct my students to quite a bit, and I try to make it a good rule of thumb that for the practice of figure drawing, that 50% of your work be done from old masters, people in history that you have a great admiration or respect for, like Rubens, or a lot of Baroque artists tend to make especially dynamic figures. So if that's something that interests you, it's always great to be studying how the figures have been designed and posed for any type of emotive quality, and then also the actual life study, where you can look at photographs that are well lit, that show the body, and then you could always torment your friends or family, of course, clothed, and make them pose for you in different positions, or use yourself as a reference. Get a mirror and do what you can to use yourself to work out any difficult positions or anatomical issues that you may have.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Our next question is from Michael Metcalf. He says, "Hi, Michael. Thanks for the workshop. You mentioned during your workshop that much to your students' anguish, you have them practice perspective. How do you have them practice it, or what things to study?"
Well, I think that kind of goes back to the last question about the basic geometric forms. I think it may be the mindset of some students that I have that they'll come right in and they just want to start rendering, or they're going to be more contour-based. So I think the anguish is breaking people out of certain habits. I think that the style that I draw in has a lot of Southern California, I think, history behind it. So maybe students that aren't as familiar with it, I think just it's hard. It's difficult. There's a level of difficulty with it that I think is frustrating. And it's hard to make yourself kind of break down what you have, especially when you're getting consistent, effective results that you are pleased with, that give rendered figures that everybody thinks is nice and you get compliments on. To go back and start drawing balls and cubes and weird figures made out of boxes is, in perception, a step back in a sense. And it is. I mean, it is retraining your eye or your hand to see something different, but it's always at the betterment of something finished or a finished product later on. But it does go back to that idea of the basic perspective principles. Many artists have said that all that you need really for any scene or image is the three basic forms, like a sphere, box, and cylinder, or cone. And that's, to me, it's just the ABCs of art, and it's the anguish of all my students that I won't let them go without having that done.
Okay, and Michael, I have a question. So in your opinion, what is the #1 mistake students tend to make when approaching drawing the anatomy in general anyway?
I think it's just contour. And I don't think that, again, like I think I mentioned in the workshop, I'm not trying to demonize it, but I think that I had a very kind of opinionated teacher at Art Center who would call us liars if we made contour drawings of the figure without knowing what they were, or he'd call us sophists. And again, basically the idea of sophistry being the act of speaking without really understanding what it is you're saying. And I think that that's tantamount to some of the beginning problems with anatomy and contour drawing, in that to see a bump or to see a curve and to put it down, and it's in a sense, and it's an extreme sense, somewhat it's lying, in that you don't know what it is. It's just what's seen but not what's understood. And so I think to really understand what's there and to faithfully be able to recreate for your viewer that experience, it does require that perspective and formal investigation into the inside before kind of settling on that outside, which I think is the goal. I mean, I think everybody would love to be making beautifully rhythmic contour linear drawings, even myself. But I also find that I have to at times take a step back and study the parts before I really get happy with what I'm laying down. So hopefully that answers.
Yes, thanks a lot, Michael. Our next question is, Michael, wait 1 second. Is an offline question from Kathy. On models that are overweight, I find it difficult to find landmarks. Any tips to on doing that?
It is more difficult, absolutely. The measurements for the landmarks that are covered in the book, and I think just maybe really briefly with the lecture, I'll use the 7.5 to 8 heads high figure will still be the same. I mean, there's not going to be any change in the displacement of the skeletal structure because of the fat on top. So it's just a matter of maybe being a little bit more attentive to begin with in inventing a type of proportion. But other than that, if it's not visible, then a different approach to the drawing can be taken. You can develop more shape or perspective relationships between perspective components, or obviously the pinch and stretch idea might be a little bit more useful in that.
Okay, thank you, Michael. We have another offline question. I think it's from Mike. He asks, which of the anatomy or the human form is the most difficult to draw, or which area is to draw?
I'm sure that'll always change for everybody, but I think for me, still the most difficult is probably the forearm. I think it just offers the most amount of movement, variation in position, exchange of anatomical part and tendon, or the lower leg, just because I think that there's so much to know there. The distribution and assignment of tendon through the ankle is one of the more difficult areas to understand, and also those areas specifically because of the difficulty that comes along with actually drawing them and not making them look like the lower leg or your forearm has exploded and all these bumps exist. So I find that those areas offer the most complex problem because of not only the delicacy involved in really understanding what's going on, but the facility that is required in actually drawing those areas out. But that being said, it changes. For it could easily be said that the head is the most difficult because there's so much attention given to that area by the viewer, the head and the hands, and the difficulty in creating likeness, which is something that I still try to study and struggle with to this day. So it's all hard to me, but all challengingly and excitingly difficult.
Okay. Our next question is a pretty interesting one. It's from Mohammed again. He asks, not sure if you're involved in the upcoming master classes in the figure drawing on CGMW. If you are, could you talk about how you would approach teaching figure drawing online? What would you cover in that course? Thanks.
I'm not sure if I am doing it or not. Haven't really talked about it that much. But I can tell you how I structure my classes. Again, I'm really concerned in my classes with students being able to perform the information. So I think that for figure drawing classes, and I don't think that there's, for me, a difference between the online